pay me for that land.
Employees,
Yeah.
people geographically.
I'm not even worried about that as the owner of that property.
So-
My property value just went up. I can increase my wealth.
So you're
Myself,
seeing it
that
as a negative.
No, I'm seeing it as a positive.
Positive for that.
Because
one
it's
owner.
not, or owners.
Okay.
I'm saying there's a lot of homeowners there, not renters.
Okay.
It's not like, which is, the flip side of the argument is, had it been probably somewhere else, there would have been a lot of rental property. And then the landlord would have been like, yeah, I'll sell it. And now you're displacing a lot of
tenants.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? Also, you've got, if I'm correct, isn't that where Lindsay Reynolds at? That's where all those kind of places. My vision, that's a good place. There's a lot of like little auto shops there. I'm thinking if it's in this zone, yeah, I can see a lot of machine shops. A little smaller manufacturing.
Neighborhood
Could go
industries
on.
where
Or
people can
expansions
get to.
there.
That's what I'm looking at, yeah.
And there's a lot of land back out there, plus it's in the bus route. But this all falls back to what Jeremy had suggested last week. Okay, this is where we are. This is something that we get a hold of the housing associations in that area right now, and see what resistance or what support we get. Yeah, that's where that trigger comes into play, right?
So a good comments. I want to do a quick time check. It's 9:42, and we want to try to open up the public comment. We also need to determine, get some suggestions on the next meeting. And I'd like to just quick talk about the next meeting suggestions. We could just some different. Let's just talk about some different times. We can do another 8 to 10 in the morning. Pat, you would recommend like 4 to 6 in the afternoon.
I thought that might be workable for more people.
I don't know, would that maybe work better with your schedule? I don't know.
You guys probably not gonna like me. I'm more of an after 5 guy. Yeah. Use money right now.
So,
No, I like it. It's okay.
so when you say after 5, does that mean what time could you start? Would it be 5 or
5 or 6. Yeah.
5?
Is 5 workable? I was just trying to include more public, you know,
right.
a time where more public and yet work for people who have to do a day job. Yeah.
Do we want to try for a 5 or 5:30 meeting?
5:30 would be.
Okay. Like a 5:30 to 7:30 meeting. Bernie, if you want to try to get some times out of all of us, or dates out of all of us.
Okay.
We maybe shoot for the next one. Okay.
I should let you all know, just for scheduling, thinking about scheduling, June 20th to June 30th, I am out.
I will be gone all that week.
And I'm out. July 5th for like a week, after July 5th on for like a weekend.
So before July 5th.
We're going to try to definitely meet next week.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
Got a lot of work.
We do.
Any final comments on the committee before we try to open the public comment?
I move that the board members review these maps in their current state and come up with their own personal recommendations to bring to the next meeting, so that discussions kind of got a foundation to start up, get the ground running.
Move the second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
Is that Randy?
good. Okay, we'll open it up to public comment.
Thank you. I'm Martha Welch, and I'm with the Columbia Climate Change Coalition, also working together with other community organizations, Women's International League for Peace and Freedom, WILF, and the NOW organization, Civic, and Keep Columbia Free is also one of the folks who did sponsor a town hall. We've given books to all those we've been able to reach so far, we do want to encourage that you try to take a look at this, because this was written by a guy who has 20 to 30 years of experience in working with these types of programs and structures, and he has a lot to say about them. We gave you some handouts last week and this week that list a few of the reasons why the public doesn't feel like these are the best tools, has been a word it's been called, to use. And we just want, in your deliberations, for you to have both sides of the picture. We want you to remain open to the possibility of advising, you know, even maybe there might be a different, better way, because currently we've talked about some of the issues of, I guess, I heard Jeremy call it sometime cannibalization even, you know, among different states or areas, these types of things that do result. We talked also about the uneven, unlevel playing field, some of the things I'm really appreciating hearing this board discuss. We talked about the lack of full understanding of what our local control will or won't be. We've talked about having confidence in the DED, and the fact that the handout we gave to you last week included a quote that I'm just going to quickly read from the State Auditor's Report of 2010. It says improvements are needed in the administration of the Enterprise Zone Tax Credit and Enhanced Enterprise Zone Tax Credit programs. The Department of Economic Development does not adequately verify data submitted by businesses claiming the EEZ and has not adequately monitored the businesses receiving credits from either program, and the economic benefits of both programs reported to the legislature are overstated. These weaknesses make it difficult to determine whether the programs are an effective use of state resources. That's on the state part, and of course we have our local tax abatement questions as well, so that we, you know, wonder about our, what is that impact on our community. All of us want the best for our community. We just have to figure out together, you know, how to get there. We want business, we want growth, but we do think that there are some community members who maybe aren't the size of folks in this level playing field conversation that might normally get a little hand up that could bring jobs to the very people that we are qualifying on their data. The poverty, the actual relief of the poverty in our area. So jobs targeted, you know, for that demographic more specifically, potentially. But a different community vision might include some things that are on this handout here. I don't want to take too much of your time and give someone else time to speak. So I'd just like to ask you to please, you know, if you wouldn't mind looking at that handout to see what some folks are thinking, and that could be possible here in our community with all of us working together creatively. So thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Wendy Green. I'll introduce myself again, from Women's International League for Peace and Freedom. And as Wanda said, we've been giving these books out. I'd like to bring your attention especially to Chapter 2, which is titled Site Location 101, How Companies Decide Where to Expand or Relocate. And the premise of this book is that companies do not choose which city to locate in based upon tax abatements. And here's a quote. This is from Paul O'Neill, who is former CEO of Alcoa and President George W. Bush's first Secretary of the Treasury. He says, "As a businessman, I never made an investment based on the tax code. If you are giving away money, I will take it. If you want to give me inducements for something I'm going to do anyway, I will take it. But good business people do not do things because of inducements. They do it because they can see what they're going to be able to earn, see that they're going to be able to earn the cost of capital out of their own intelligence and organizational resources." And Leroy, the author of this book, says, "Subsidies are just wasted windfalls, paying companies to do what they would have done anyway. that means less money for things that really do help create jobs like skills and infrastructure. Also, Leroy says that an EEZ as a jobs program is a blunt instrument. He said it's like using a chainsaw to cut butter. And you will see that comment on the videos that we made of the last meeting at the webcam meeting at the Columbia Public Library. And at the bottom of this handout, there are links to those videos, which are up now. And you're the first people to see these videos because we have not publicized the location of these videos yet. Okay, there's another chapter in this book that's very important on property tax abatements and your local school. This is an extremely important chapter. On your handout, there are a couple of comments on blight and eminent domain, important comments. I hope you'll read those. I won't take time to say them. Also, on the back of this handout, we copied for you a newspaper article. It was in the Columbia Missourian, reprinted from the Kansas City Star, about Kansas City area. And crazy things are happening there because businesses are staying in the greater metropolitan area, but they're flipping back and forth across the state line to get tax abatements. So it's a pretty crazy thing going on there. We don't want this kind of out of control thing to happen here. Also, a very important thing that if you all designate any part of Columbia as an EEZ, this will automatically trigger blight through the city council. So really, this blight is your responsibility because you're the trigger to get the city council to blight Columbia. And also, I would be very interested in asking a question here. Are the blight zones the same as the EEZ zone? Do they have the same boundary? Or would the blight zones be larger than the EEZ? That's unclear to me. And if the blight zones would be larger, I think the public would love to have a map that would tell what are the boundaries of the blight zones.
I'm not aware that they would be.
Would they be the same or bigger?
I'm sure I understand the question.
Okay, when you designate an EEZ zone, you are automatically triggering the city council to a blight map. Are those blight boundaries the same as the EEZ boundaries, or would there be a larger territory on the blight map?
I think if I could speak to that issue, because it's something I thought about a lot before I got appointed to this board. And from my perspective of what this board is doing, we are not taking evidence about conditions of blight in the community. We are not making a recommendation to the council that this area of Columbia is blighted. We are not, I mean, the evidence that is necessary for the council to determine that portions of the community are blighted is not the same stuff that we're considering to determine eligibility for an EEZ. You're right that one of the statutory requirements for an EEZ is that the governing body declares the portion of the community that is within the zone to be blighted. It's my understanding of our job that they have not asked us to consider that evidence, and I don't believe we're going to. If I hear otherwise from council, I hear otherwise from council. But it's a related question, but a separate question. The evidence about eligibility for the EEZ that this board is considering is poverty and unemployment data. And the evidence that the council will have to consider is both the poverty and unemployment data as well as the statutory requirements to declare any part of our city to be blighted. And that, I believe, is their job to do, not ours.
Well, I'm sure you're right, Jeremy. I accept what you say. At the same time, there is another option. I mean, you as members of the blight board have, I'm sorry, the EEZ board. Sorry. As members of the EEZ board have your
See, that'll be in the newspaper.
you have your duties laid out, but you in a sense have a higher calling as a citizen of this town to look at what is going to be the best for Columbia and all of the residents here. And on that basis, I would ask you to try to make some other judgments about whether or not you should determine EEZ zones or light for any of Columbia, because you do have that option. And I would like you to really think about that possibility. Being on a higher plane and just only being a member of the EEZ board. Okay.
Can I say something just briefly? Because I didn't get to talk last time, so for me to sit still this long is really good. My name is Kisha Duncan, and to be quite honest, if I dig deep down inside myself, as much as I'd like to say I'm completely and totally against EEZ, I'm not sure that's really true. Before I say what I say, I want to preface by saying I'm not fundamentally against EEZ, but I'm definitely against EEZ with no protections in place because our public services need so much. But I think the thing that I take issue with the most, that I find the most interesting, that nobody talks about, but that you see written, that the Enhanced Enterprise Zone application, when you talk about eligibility of businesses and what they have to do to be compliant, they only have to create 2 jobs to be in compliance. 2 jobs is all they have to create. And depending on the kind of business it is and what kind of educational requirement is going to be needed to get one of those 2 jobs, it still is not going to help those that are the poorest and the most disenfranchised in our community. Because if you're talking people that have a high school diploma or GED or less in education, they're not going to be eligible for a job with IBM. And if there are only 2 jobs to apply for, I don't see how that's going to put much of a dent in our poverty, rate in Columbia and Boone County, especially in those areas that you were speaking about specifically. 2 jobs isn't going to get it. I mean, I'm no genius, but that just doesn't make sense. I don't see how 2 jobs is worth all this. And if there's no way for us as a community to ensure that more than 2 jobs are going to be a result of any business that is eligible for an EEZ and wants to come here, or is eligible for the process and wants to come here, I just don't get it. I just don't get it. So.
Thank you.
Someone over there.
We've got time for one more.
Well,
I got some of this house.
Let me try and make this very quick. It was an interesting discussion that you had. This business about the glass being half empty or half full, depending upon displacement of folks in a particular area where the residents live, or whether or not that benefited them in terms of businesses and providing jobs and so on. There was also some discussion about other layers, like the Planning and Zoning Commission having other layers. Don't forget that the Planning and Zoning Commission is an advisory board as well. And in fact, if you take this issue, just for example, what's coming up tonight at Planning and Zoning is the Odal rezoning request. The Odal rezoning request downtown, and that's without any kind of requisite pressure from a blight designation. The land underneath some of these properties are becoming more valuable, and it is an inducement for people to develop that property. If you add blight to the mix, what you do is you tend to drive some of the property values down, and one of the unintended consequences of that is to make that land more attractive for that kind of potential displacement. Now, I don't know which of these is going to happen, half empty or half full, whether or not it's going to benefit that particular area because it produces some jobs, or whether it's going to cause this downward pressure because of the blight to displace some of these folks because the land becomes more attractive for the development. It's something to consider. And all of these levels, these protective levels, just like you correctly stated, Ms. Linsmeyer, these are all advisory groups. The buck stops at the city council, and if they want to decide one way or another, regardless of what is set in motion because of these unintended consequences, they make the final decision. And one other bit, and it was interesting, when you brought this thing about the business about those two maps and how they're related to each other, and there are differences obviously in the EEZ program and the two maps that Bernie presented to you from the 2000 census data to 2010. The take-home message for that is that those areas of poverty are increasing. And as a relative guide, that's probably true with the EEZ as it relates to the EEZ as well. There are ways to normalize that data, but it may be more complicated than you really want to get into.
Good point.
Thank you.
Can I just ask for a clarification of, there was discussion of looking at new data, and from listening to the discussion, I wasn't quite clear. Is that done, what was shown today? Is it an ongoing project to look at new poverty data? Has that been determined?
As I understand it, we were able to get some new poverty data, and we'll keep open-minded trying to find more.
Sure, that's ongoing.
But there's nothing else scheduled. And the next quick clarification is, would it be possible to see the confidence intervals that were calculated on the poverty data that is being used, the 2000 poverty data? I know that the state has that and calculates that, but it hasn't been included in tables that have been presented publicly. Is it possible to add the confidence interval on that 2000 poverty data?
The 2000?
Yeah, well, whatever's being used, whether it be 2000 or whether the new data is used, but so the public can see the confidence interval and can see where in the confidence interval, or what part of the confidence interval is actually being used.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that. Bernie, are you?
That would be a request to DEP. Yeah, we can certainly ask, and I think we should, I think.
And you're saying confidence level, can you expand on what you're asking?
Well, when they calculate it statistically, they say that there's a certain interval within, it's a statistical thing, that they have confidence that the answer falls within a certain range. And that range can be a 5% range, or a 10 or a 20 or a 50% range, and it's good to see that. And what you've been presented is a single number, and ideally I would hope that single number is in the middle of that confidence interval. And I would just like to see that presented.
And I mean, from my perspective, it's enough. Trying to build our understanding of the data is an ongoing project. I would like for us to be able to get as much of the new data as we can. What we saw today was a great help. Thank you. As we discussed, I think there are ways to try and understand it better than I do right now, and I'd like to be able for this board to do that.
Sir, that's exactly where I come from. Even though the application may be based on 2000 information, I personally need to see the most accurate, most current information for my decision. And what we're having a problem with is that the old and new data do not necessarily overlap the way I predicted they work, because I didn't think the census blocks changed and all that stuff. So it's a matter of, it sounds like you're well versed in this, it's a matter of normalizing or lining up the data so that we can make it, line up the best as we can.
There might be other resources in the community to help present that alignment of the data. So I hope that you can reach out to other people who do those statistics, both for the state and for the city. And if you're interested in some of those, I can discuss it with, after the meeting.
Yeah.
I have to personally go on, so.
Thank you.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Okay.
Thank
you. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for taking time to be here.
Well, we really appreciate your willingness to sit on this board.
Ma'am, can I get the spelling of your name and you might have a few. Quick call me, ma'am, you can.